Kia ora, good evening. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Nick Truebridge. Hariaki nei, who's your vote for mayor? What about councillors? Well, for most Kiwis, the answer is no one, as turnout reaches a grim new low. Most transparent ever? Yeah, right. The Ombudsman has uncovered some worrying trends amongst government departments. Another big supermarket player has arrived in Aotearoa. We'll take a look at what it offers that the competition doesn't. 2.5 million Floridians are under evacuation orders as Hurricane Ian approaches. And we finally hear from the French rugby ref who crushed Wallaby dreams of rugby championship glory. You can watch us live on Facebook, Freeview Channel 50 and Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. Ngā mihi o te ahi. I'm Evie Ashton. Voter turnout is at a record low halfway through the voting period for the local elections, and experts say the death of the Queen and the long weekend may have contributed. Just 5.3% have voted in Auckland to date, along with 10.9% in Christchurch and 4.9% in Wellington. Many districts have recorded just over half the number of votes compared to the same time in previous elections. In Whangārei, outgoing Mayor Cheryl Mai says it's been mind-boggling to see just 8.6% of the district vote for her replacement so far.
I'm absolutely gobsmacked. I'm so disappointed. I was really hoping that this election we would get a massive turnout of people engaged in elections, and my hopes have been dashed.
Voting closes on Saturday, October the 8th. The Chief Ombudsman has identified significant gaps in how government agencies respond to Official Information Act requests. He found processes adopted by agencies have little or nothing to do with the law. Political reporter Giles Dexter has more.
Peter Bosher looked at how well a dozen core government agencies are complying with the OIA. Mr Bosher found media teams are failing to give journalists a reason when refusing to provide information or inform them of the right to complain. He says media teams do not seem to apply the law, and there's a widespread misapprehension that many media information requests don't fall under the OIA. But he acknowledged agencies are increasingly taking the initiative and proactively releasing information to the public.
An advocate for spinal muscular atrophy patients says a funding announcement by Pharmac is massive, but New Zealand is still behind the eight ball. The drug buying agency has reached a provisional agreement to fund nasinacin, commonly known as Spinraza, for people with spinal muscular atrophy. But it's only available for people aged under 18. Fiona Tolich says other countries fund the drug for adults.
The application originally was for children. We never got that across the line until hopefully now, and therefore we are so far behind the eight ball. So we now need Biogen to put in an application for adults as well.
Feedback on the proposed funding of nasinacin can be submitted until October the 24th. Queenstown businesses say they have to think outside the box to attract more workers. The resort town is bracing for a busy summer with all tourists allowed back in. More than 600 jobs were available at a recent recruitment event that roughly 100 prospective employees attended. Yonder General Manager Jodie Cordell says employees can't rely only on offering a decent wage.
We're obviously clawing for people that we know are leaving or changing jobs for the end of season and stuff like that. And then we've been speaking about trying to get adverts out into Canada and America, Europe. We all keep relying on the Australian side of it. So we've just had to really push ourselves to get onto a wider market.
A recruitment event encouraging winter workers to stick around is being held at the Lake Wānaka Centre tonight. And the theme of next year's census will be Coverage is King. 44% of dwellings will get their own forms to fill out, as opposed to 3% in 2018, which contributed to poor population coverage and engagement. Nearly double the number of census staff will be working in a bid to increase turnout. Statistics Minister David Clark says the investment wasn't made to reach Māori and Pasifika communities last time, making the 2023 census even more important for decision makers.
It's important for things like elections. How do we set out our electorates? It's important for our funding formulas for health and for education. It's also important for Māori and Pacific communities as they make decisions about their futures. They want to know where their people are, and they want to also understand the nature of their communities.
The census will be held on March the 7th next year. In sport, the White Ferns captain Sophie Devine says she won't be looking to capitalise on the rule change surrounding cricket's most controversial dismissal. The Mancad has again been in the headlines after it was used by India this week to win a women's one-dayer against England. The game's laws have been changed to allow the Mancad, where the bowler runs out the non-striking batter, to be a legitimate run-out. Devine says it's not... Sorry, is her name Devine or Divine? I'm getting that wrong.
Divine.
It is Divine,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Devine says it's not something that teams she leads will be doing.
You've got to look at it for what it is. It's a legitimate dismissal, and fair play to India and Dept Sharma for, I guess, going with it. But personally, it's certainly something I probably wouldn't look to, I guess, uphold appeals in that way.
Thank you, Nick. Thank goodness you're here.
No sweat.
One of the country's leading jockeys, Sam Weatherly, has been banned for 9 weeks for reckless riding, which racing authorities have ruled caused the incident that led to the death of Japanese rider Taiki Yanagida. 28-year-old Yanagida died in Waikato Hospital last month, 6 days after he came off his horse during a race at Cambridge. And French rugby referee Mathieu Raynal avoided looking at any media coverage or social media in the wake of his controversial call in the opening Bledisloe Cup test. Speaking after being named French Referee of the Year, Raynal told French media he stands by the time-wasting call he made in the dying stages of that game that ultimately led to the All Blacks coming from behind to win the match. Raynal maintains he didn't see the public backlash, deleting apps on his phone, just keeping Candy Crush and his clock. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, it's the economy, stupid. Our largely libertarian thinker Eric Crampton discusses how we keep markets competitive. Brian Easton looks at efforts to bring the invisible hand into play in the formerly planned economies of Russia and China, while our linguist Dr. Julia de Bress looks at language and cultural identity and how one can smother the other, especially when it came to her Dutch heritage. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
This is RNZ National on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Nick Truebridge next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. From Northland to Taumaru Nui, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupō. Mostly cloudy with a few showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine with high cloud, a few spots of light rain tomorrow. From Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape and the Wairarapa. Cloud increasing today, rain at times tomorrow. For Marlborough and Nelson, rain becoming widespread this evening with some heavy falls about the ranges, clearing Nelson tomorrow evening. For Buller, Westland and Fiordland, rain heavy at times, easing tomorrow morning. Canterbury, high cloud, rain developing tomorrow afternoon with brief thunderstorms possible, then snow lowering to 400 metres tomorrow night. Otago and Southland, fine spells and a few showers this evening, rain developing tomorrow morning, easing to a few showers tomorrow evening, snow lowering to 400 metres tomorrow. And for Kohu, the Chatham Islands, mainly fine today, cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing towards evening. The time is coming up to 8 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic and more headlines for you at 5:20.
Thanks, Evie. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint. I'm Nick Truebridge. Well, we're halfway through the voting period for the 2022 local government elections, but so far, apathy, yes, apathy, is having a landslide win. Voter turnout has been at a record low in many regions. It's just half of what it was at the same time in previous elections. Katie Todd has more.
9 years at the helm of Whangarei District Council is coming to an end for Cheryl Mai, but the end of her tenure has come with a bit of a shock. Just 8.6% of the eligible voters in her district have had a say on her replacement so far.
I'm absolutely gobsmacked. I'm so disappointed. I was really hoping that this election we would get a massive turnout of people engaged in elections, and yeah, my hopes have been dashed.
Right around the country, the number of people with a purple election envelope sitting on their dining table, yet to be opened or sent back, is sitting at record highs. These people in Auckland's Aotea Square today are among the whopping 94.7% of Aucklanders with a voting form at home.
I just haven't yet. I intend to. Just going to sign the paper, and I'm not sure which is the better candidate.
I kind of, just making the excuse that I'm too busy.
Haven't filled it out yet. I've got it in the envelope though.
Election data shows 5.3% of Aucklanders have voted so far. In Christchurch, it's nearly 11%, and in Wellington, nearly 5%, all down on the same time last election. Taupo appears to be home to the least engaged voters of all. Just 3.96% of the district's eligible population have voted. On the other side of the coin, almost 20% of voters in Westland have had a say, but that too is still down on the same time period last election. So what's happening? AUT political scientist Julian Molyneux thinks people have just had other things on their mind.
We've had a distraction in the last week or two in terms of our news coverage, which has been focused very much around the death of Queen Elizabeth II. We've also had a long weekend, so people have been a bit out of routine. So possibly voters are a bit behind in terms of getting around to voting and also posting those votes in.
But then there's the length of the voting period. Great for giving people a chance to read up on the candidates, she says. Not so great for procrastinators.
And we've got a very complex ballot with lots of decision-making points, so we do need time to fill it out. But the downside of 2.5 weeks to vote is the possibility of just putting it off until later, until it's too late.
Then there's the method of voting. Cheryl Mai fears it just hasn't kept up with the times.
People are getting fewer and fewer letters in the post, so maybe people are not picking them up out of their letter boxes, and even then not being able to find where to post their voting papers once they've filled them out. It feels like perhaps I think we've missed a trick with not having electronic voting for local elections.
Auckland Council has explored that idea after polling people in 2019 and finding 2/3 of voters would prefer to vote online. However, cost and security concerns came in the way of its proposed trial of an e-voting system that year. The council says it will continue to advocate for more work in that area, but it needs the backing of the local government sector and of central government to make it work. In the meantime, Julian Molyneux says those who are voting don't typically represent society. Research shows they're much more likely to be older and homeowners. In turn, candidates write policies to suit them.
And so there'll be less in your policy platforms around public transport and recreation facilities, and perhaps more about keeping rates down. And this is a further disincentive for young people to vote. If they feel that they're not being spoken to by any of the candidates, it reinforces low turnout among those groups.
That's front of mind for this Auckland voter who's bucked the trend and already got her ballot in.
A lot of people don't realise that the local board is actually more governing to them, to their personal lives, than the national ones are. So if they, like things like rates and water and things like that, it's actually the local board that dictates how that happens. Yeah, have your say, otherwise miss out.
Voting closes on Saturday, 8th of October at 12 noon.
Katie Todd there with that story, and it begs the question, have you voted? Why or why not? Is it just too niggly to get around to it? Of course, there isn't a voting day per se. You've got to go and find a ballot box to drop it in at. So have you done it? Will you do it? Who's your pick for mayor if you're in Auckland? Let us know. You can text us 2101 or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is coming up 13 minutes past 5. Costco has opened its doors in New Zealand, promising to be a great disruptor. Some shoppers camped outside the West Auckland store overnight, and police even put out a warning about traffic around it this afternoon. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Nick Monroe went to check it out.
Open for business. Customers came from near and far today to finally roam Costco's big four walls.
So 5 o'clock I woke up, had my breakfast and got dressed and came over here. I'm so excited, it's finally here.
Yeah, I got up at 5:30 this morning from Silverdale. to drive down here to make sure I was not lining up outside. So I was very lucky. I was probably one of the first 20.
Nearly 400 staff have been hired to work at this huge new store. Managing Director Patrick Noon says shoppers can expect a better price point as long as they're prepared to buy in bulk.
If we package something in a larger pack size, we can then save money on packaging. We only buy one item, typically. We don't buy a whole selection of things. So then we can fill up one truck with that one item, and logistically and efficiently we can ship that merchandise to the warehouse. So all that cost savings gets passed on in the price to the member.
But they won't be selling alcohol after failed negotiations with the local trust.
We just couldn't work out a good deal, a good way to put a liquor store inside a Costco. It doesn't seem to make sense. But we're still working with the trust, and who knows, in the future we may come to some arrangement.
The warehouse floor is 1.5 hectares. That's roughly the size of 1.5 rugby fields. And there's over $20 million worth of product in store here today. And despite over 800 car parking spaces being available, the traffic is still bumper to bumper as shoppers queue to get through the doors.
Come on over here, my little snippets, and I'll take real good care of you.
Almost everything is big. There's 7-foot teddy bears and 12-foot witches in time for Halloween. There's also a hearing aid centre, pharmacy and optometrists. To the meat and seafood section, where 8 rotisserie ovens are filled with chickens and freezers are stacked to the brim. Lily and Michael have been filling up their trolley.
Yeah, we have got some bargains here. We've got lots of different sorts of meat down here, mince and lamb legs at the bottom. That looks good, doesn't it?
Shoppers were clogging the toilet paper aisle. Plenty of people keen to stock up in a big way. Others were there to splash their cash on something special.
Well, it's not as big as I would have liked, but it's big enough. It's just a half-carat solitaire, which I've kind of waited 45 years for.
It's the Tide Pods, Ziploc bags, kitchen tidies.
Linda has been there, done that with the Costco overseas and was keen to check out Auckland's one.
My husband used to call it the $600 club. He didn't feel he could get out of there for anything less. I probably think I'd be close to that, yes. There's a lot of staples here. I might need to go to the car, empty out and come back and do another run.
Yeah, how much longer do you reckon you've got?
I've got all day.
And she's not alone.
When I first walked in the door, I thought I had my thoughts on what I wanted, but then I looked at that, the Kenwood, I go, oh, I want one of those, and I want one of those. So, oh my gosh, I've got to control myself.
Came out with the freezer, came in for a look. I've seen a lot of people with trolleys full of stuff that I'm sure they don't need.
And just as you're leaving, if you didn't already think there was everything here, a display of coffins. Yes, coffins.
A display of coffins, there you go. On your way out, get yourself a coffin as well. Louise Tanuth and cameraman Nick Monroe with that story. We'll put the video up on our website. Evie, are you busting to get to Costco?
Well, certainly not to buy coffins in bulk.
Yeah. Is it bulk on coffins or cheap for one? I don't know. We'll go and investigate. You can also get $60 for a kg of blueberries and $7.99 rather for a rotisserie chicken, which that's I feel like they're not that far off that at Countdown.
You have to drive quite a way to get to Westgate.
Yeah, and $1.50 for a hot dog and a drink if you're a member as well, apparently. And apparently the hot dogs aren't bad.
Well, you can pay for stuff outside other big brand retailers, and that goes to a good cause for a sausage.
Exactly, yeah. All pork as well. Who knows what parts of the pig, though. Anyway, it is 18 minutes past 5. Ka mau tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Coming up, Vodafone is changing its name to One New Zealand. What do we think about that? We'll speak to the boss shortly about why they're doing it. But first, the Chief Ombudsman's flagging concerns tonight about how government agencies are responding to requests for official information. Peter Bosher has run the ruler over 12 agencies and found some media teams are breaching the Official Information Act. He's also found some ministers are getting a heads up about information heading out 3 to 5 days before it's released. The Chief Ombudsman, Peter Bosher, joins me now. Evening, Mr. Bosher.
Good evening to you, Nick. Nice to talk.
You too. Let's start with, obviously the Crown Ministries, but there is a connection to the government there. And of course, this government promised to be the most open and transparent ever. Is it?
Well, this investigation of ours was concerned with government agencies. I really need to focus on that, not the executive. That's the way we did this. And what we found was that since the last report, look, there have been some improvements. And over the pandemic, when one might have expected some agencies would really tuck in and not release in the way that we might have expected, in fact, they did pretty well. The concern we've flagged is actually a really important one, especially for journalists. A lot of agencies have set up media teams. They respond to requests for information. They're not clearly identifying these as OIA requests, which has a flow-on effect because often the information isn't being supplied, reasons aren't being given for refusal, and the ability to complain to the Ombudsman isn't being mentioned. And that's not what Section 19 of the Official Information Act requires. So we've taken of the 12 agencies, 8 to task and said, you're breaching the law, you'll have to do better.
Yeah, and let's drill into some of the issues here. I mean, you mentioned one of them at the top there about media teams failing to give journalists reasons why they are refusing to provide information. Where is this culture, where is this departure from the law coming from, do you think?
I think everything turns, if you don't mind me saying so, on strong culture and good leadership. People will follow the exhortations and the expectations of good leadership. I just don't think that some agencies are paying attention. I don't think they're giving this the time and the resource it needs. The end result is this, and it gets slightly worse if I can indicate this to you. Let's say that a request for information is met, so far so good. If it's not met, what often then happens is that it's put into a formal, protracted OIA track, and often the information isn't supplied until the 20 days has expired. Now, that's the maximum under the Act, not the optimum. And there's no seeming halfway house of agencies having the resources and the will to getting on and doing this as quickly as they should.
We get hung up on this as journalists, right, Mr. Bosher? You know, I think fairly so. Often we feel like we're not being treated fairly. But if I'm Joe Public, why does it matter?
Because during the pandemic, for instance, when it was really important that there was information flowing, I believe the public will accept decisions, often coercive ones, if they understand the basis upon which those decisions are being made. And the reason that New Zealand features as number one transparency in the world is because we do try and we endeavour to give explanations, as the government did during COVID. When, though, that falls by the wayside and people begin to lose trust in the freedom of information flow, that's when the rot starts to set in trust and transparency. That's why it's so important.
You mentioned this issue of ministers being flagged, 3 to 5 days in advance before information's being released. A problem why? Because the Act requires that a decision is made and communicated and acted on as soon as possible. That's what the Act says. So let's say that you make a request and your request, shall I just say for no reason other than I'm making it, is to the Ministry of Health. What should happen is the Chief Executive should make a decision on your request, and if it's to grant you the information, it should be released to you, and for your information, no surprises, it can be supplied to the Minister at about the same time. So far, so good. It begins to get very convoluted and unclear when a decision's made on your request and that's conveyed to the Minister days before it's conveyed to you. There's the temptation to think that something is going on, being talked about and being put in a position so as to make it look good. That's the problem there is in trust not being kept. Thanks, Mr. Bosher. Peter Bosher there, who is, of course, Chief Ombudsman. It is 23 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Still to come, we'll speak to Vodafone's boss about why they're changing name, but first it's time for the headlines with Evie.
Kia ora, Nick. A record low voter turnout so far for the local body elections is causing concern. The Hamilton City Council says just over 7% of voting papers have been received so far, compared with nearly 15% at the same time during the last elections. 5.3% of Aucklanders have voted so far, and in Wellington, the figure is nearly 5%. AUT political scientist Julian Molyneux thinks people have had other things on their mind. The New Zealand dollar has fallen below 56 US cents for the first time in more than 2 years. It comes as financial markets react to the big rate rises imposed by central banks to fight inflation. Nelson and Tasman will have more time to assess the damage from the heavy rain in August. The local recovery transition period for the region's state of emergency has been extended for another 28 days. Nearly double the number of Census staff will be working next year in an effort to boost turnout. 44% of dwellings will get their own census forms to fill out on March the 7th. During the 2018 census, only 3% of the surveyed population was delivered paper forms. And Germany is describing major leaks from 2 Russian gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea as targeted attacks. Ukraine claims Russia is responsible and is trying to destabilise Europe. Russia slashed gas deliveries to Europe after the West imposed sanctions for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Auckland on the Northern Motorway, State Highway 1, a truck breakdown has been blocking the left northbound lane after Esmond Road off-ramp for the last hour. That's causing delays all the way back past the city, east, west and south. The rest of the country's roads appear to be running smoothly at the moment. Our next headlines and traffic are at about 5:40.
Thanks, Evie. French rugby referee Mathieu Reynal has broken his silence over the controversial time-wasting call he made in the dying stages of the first Bledisloe test earlier this month. Wallabies first 5 Bernard Foley was pinged for time-wasting as he prepared to make the kick for touch, with Reynal awarding the All Blacks a scrum. And we know the rest. The All Blacks went on to win in a thriller. We're joined now by sports editor Stephen Hewson. Evening, Stephen. Mr. Reynal has said, well, what about this now, infamous, famous, depends what side of the ledger you're on, I suppose, incident.
Controversial covers it all, doesn't
overseas.
it? No? Controversial.
What's he saying?
Sides of it. Well, he's basically saying I stick with my decision, 100% behind it, and I've got no reason to change it. He was talking, I suppose he sort of spoke of it. It just seems the story just keeps on giving, but he was talking after being named the French Rugby Referee of the Year. So he was taking the opportunity to try and set the record straight from his own opinion, and he's said he takes total responsibility for what he did. He had a necessary reason to make the decision. He says he told the Wallabies to get on with it 5 times. The fact they didn't, he then made the call. I suppose we've all got an opinion on it. I mean, usually it comes down to the All Blacks. If you're an All Black supporter, you're pretty happy, and obviously the Wallabies weren't, because we had the likes of Tim Horan and Matt Gitto, former Wallabies, all coming out and saying how horrendous the decision was. But I mean, I suppose from my point of view, the way it sort of sits is that, yes, it would appear to be the right call. However, we haven't seen that call before, have we? And that sort of is where the controversy lies, that, you know, all teams are guilty of time wasting to one degree or another. It's just that Mr. Reynal has called the Wallabies out on it, and it's had quite a big consequence.
Yeah, big consequence indeed. Thanks, Stephen. Stephen Hewson there, our sports editor, joining us from Wellington. Right, Vodafone's unveiled its new name, One New Zealand. The telco says it's changing its name from the start of next year as part of being a domestic operator. The change means the Warriors will be the One New Zealand Warriors, not the Vodafone New Zealand Warriors. Vodafone New Zealand CEO Jason Paris joins us now. Evening, Mr. Paris. Why are you doing this?
G'day, Nick. Thanks for having us. Look, we're doing it because it allows us to invest a lot more money back into New Zealand. A lot of New Zealanders probably won't know that we pay for the use of the Vodafone brand in this country, and so the money that we have been previously paying overseas we'll now bring all of that back into New Zealand and reinvest it in networks and service and all those things that customers love.
So how much are you saving?
I can't tell you exactly.
Ballpark?
It's a significant number. And it's a saving every year that we'll be reinvesting into Aotearoa. So it'll be it's a lot of money, and already even just the one initiative we've launched today, One Good Kiwi, that's an investment of over $1 million, and so we've got many more of those to come. So that gives you an indication. It's a big number.
And I mean, obviously you do due diligence before picking a new name, right? But we've done a bit ourselves. And did you know it's the same name as a far-right group in New Zealand?
I've seen a bit of chatter this afternoon on that. No, I didn't. I've responded a couple of times to a couple of niche comments, and what I've said to them is, look, One New Zealand is about the best of Aotearoa, like diversity and innovation and inclusion, not the worst, and that's what the One New Zealand brand is going to stand for. And so, I saw a bit of chatter. I've responded, and we're confident that this brand, once New Zealanders see the actions that we're going to be taking, they'll be proud of it because it's going to be the best.
Yeah, people trust a brand though, right? That's half of what brands are about. So are you worried you might lose some of that?
Not at all. Like, the Vodafone brand has been very strong for us up until this point, but it only has stood for mobility. And now we're an organisation that's about cloud and IoT and security and all of those great things that customers love. The brand is important. We like the fact that One New Zealand signals a team of one coming together of all shapes and sizes and races. Is one team, but what we're confident on is that the money that we're bringing back into New Zealand will be well spent, and our customers will be delighted because of that.
How will things change, Jason? I see, looking at my phone this evening, it's already got One New Zealand on the top banner there. What else will we see?
Well, you're going to see a lot more onshore service, so bringing people back from overseas. We've already got 100% of our business call centres now back in New Zealand, and bringing a lot more back home. You'll see us continue to invest in rolling out our network and 5G right across the country, even faster than we have been. We launched that One Good Kiwi, as I mentioned before, which is $1.2 million going to the communities that need it the most, and our customers will decide how that gets allocated. And then security is really important for businesses in New Zealand. We've seen a pretty significant cybersecurity breach happening in Australia. We've just given our customers a free business upgrade to the highest Microsoft security product on us. So just a few examples of the things that we're doing for our customers from today, and we've got a few more in store coming forward.
Thanks, Jason. Vodafone CEO Jason Paris joining us there. It is 32 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Time for business news now with Nona Peltier and The Warehouse. I mean, a Costco rival, you could argue, right?
Well, sort of, except they don't sell in big bulk. I don't think
they
they sell
some stuff.
Well, yeah, but they don't sell coffins. I know that for sure. Just saying.
Good point. What have you got on The Warehouse for us? Sorry, you stumped me with that last comment.
I did, didn't I?
Very witty.
All right, well, let's see. The Warehouse delivered their full year result. It was a profit that was down on the year earlier, not surprising considering that their Auckland stores, that's the brick and mortar ones, were closed for 23% of the time. 84 days in total, as that was because of COVID, but also the rest of the country, there was at least 21 days where there was disruption to businesses outside of Auckland. So it's not a surprise that their profit was hit by that, sales also, and their gross margin was down about 1 percentage point. So overall, it wasn't a spectacular result. However, the company did talk about its plans for the future. Its expectations are it's carrying a lot more inventory. It's expecting that the second quarter, which is for them, that's the November through to January period, they're expecting that to be their critical period. They're hoping that sales will be strong for that. They're also talking about expanding their grocery and pantry items. They were negotiating with both Foodstuffs and Woolworths. They're the big supermarket chains here in New Zealand. They're yet to make a deal there. But when they do, they're not planning to become a full-service supermarket, but they are going to expand their grocery and pantry items over well, whenever they can make a deal.
I think we had a consumer confidence survey last week, was it? Something like that.
Yes.
But you've got a labour market survey.
I have one.
What's it showing?
It's showing that there's a lot more strength in confidence as the labour market is strong. There's lots of jobs around. However, people still aren't feeling very confident about their wages. So even though we know that there has been wage growth, somehow, I guess because of the inflation pressures that we're seeing in food and so forth, they're not feeling richer for it. So I guess some people are getting wage increases and feeling quite good. Others, not so much.
Yeah, okay. Speaking of money, the markets, please.
Well, okay, so the Top 50 index, that's our equities, it closed down 0.8%. That was a 95-point drop to 11,120. Not really a big surprise considering the global upheaval on interest rates and inflation. And, well, we could go on. There's a long list there. So our dollar is somewhat depressed today at 55.9 US cents. That's down 1 cent from where we were yesterday. Holding relatively steady against the Australian at 87.4 and 52.4 British pounds.
Any Costco visits planned?
No, I don't have a pantry big enough to fit any of their stuff.
You don't need a, what was it on Morning Report? Like a 2-metre Grim Reaper or something?
Oh!
Something like that,
Gee, that would go very well with the coffin idea.
And bags of 48 toilet rolls?
Oh, well, I don't know what you'd use those for, but okay.
Don't you? I do.
Well, you could store them.
I suppose so, yeah.
In the coffin.
You never know. Anyway,
Dual
thanks.
purpose.
Enough. Thanks, Nona. I appreciate it. All right, back on track. Sorry, we're getting very sidetracked this evening. Tourists in Queenstown arrived before the workers did this winter, putting business under pressure. They don't want history to repeat for the summer months. Meanwhile, staff in the town are taking their pick of the best pay and conditions to suit them. Tess Brunton is in Queenstown.
There's excitement and trepidation in Queenstown as Aotearoa prepares to roll out the welcome mat to all tourists this summer. Republic Hospitality operates 10 bars and restaurants and a recruitment company. Its human resources manager, Eilish Fenton, says they need all the staff they can get.
Honestly, we can't have enough. Hopefully we're in for a phenomenal summer season, and especially as we do a workforce side of it as well. We have a huge amount, but I'd suppose the biggest one is we could take on another 60 staff easily and just be tipping along.
She remains optimistic the workers will arrive in time, but wants New Zealand advertised as a destination more overseas.
Australia tourism is advertised everywhere. I was in Ireland and I was in the UK, bus stops, on the radio, on television, and there was nothing for New Zealand. We weren't even there, and people just keep saying to us, oh, I didn't know you guys were open yet. When do you open?
Yonder and the World Bar have cut back their opening hours and some meal services due to staff shortages. Jodie Cordell runs Yonder and says they need another 30 to 40 staff to run both businesses full-time.
If we want to go full-time, so that would be sort of 7 days and then open right from 7 a.m. till 2 a.m. for Yonder, and then 12 till sort of 3 or 4 for World Bar, it'd probably, a Yonder kitchen alone needs double the amount of staff it's got right now, so probably about 7 or 8 chefs are needed in probably both kitchens to make that function as a restaurant.
She's hopeful more working holiday visa holders from further afield, including America and England, will start applying. She says businesses have to think outside the box more when they're looking to attract staff.
Every business is trying to come up with their own sort of incentive plan in order to sort of pull people in. It's just trying to do it within reason and not just throwing things at everybody in order for them to get working and then them not actually having the abilities to do it at the standard we need. So yeah, I think everybody's just kind of deciding on what that is going to be for summer and where to sort of start.
Eric's Fish and Chips usually operates in Wanaka and Queenstown, but had to close the Wanaka food truck because there wasn't enough staff. Owner Anna Arndt has been advertising flat sticks since March and only wants 3 more staff for the summer.
It's scary, and it's scary because the winter has been so busy. It's been, look, don't get me wrong, it's great. The Australians have come back here in force, and Australians love fish and chips, so we've been really busy, and that's wonderful, but I just do need some more staff.
Anna has sponsored a few workers from overseas, but a few staff are also moving on ahead of summer. And she also started a bonus system a few months ago. But even adding 3 more staff won't be enough to reopen in Wanaka. She's now grappling with what summer will look like if she can't get the workers.
I'll have to work a hell of a lot. And, well, we just have to close at different times, we're not open for as long hours. We close for 6 days at the beginning of September just to give the staff a break because everyone have worked so hard. We have still managed to be open 7 days, so hopefully we can still do that.
The Ministry of Social Development, Hospitality New Zealand and Go With Tourism are collaborating to create recruitment events in Wanaka and Queenstown. The Ministry's Southern Regional Commissioner, Steph Voigt, says they're focused on encouraging winter workers to stick around.
These are people already in the area, have accommodation, which can be one of the biggest barriers to people looking for work in this area. Basically, we're looking to do whatever we can to partner up with industry and help address the challenges we are seeing in this labour market.
A recruitment event is being held at the Lake Wanaka Centre from 6 to 8 o'clock tonight.
Tess Brunton there in Queenstown. Let's go to some of your feedback now. Firstly, on voting. Nick, council voting isn't just... there's a theme developing here. Council voting isn't just apathy. I mean, where can I find a mailbox? Thanks for that. And Jason in Christchurch sticks with that theme. I've filled our voting form, spent the last week trying to find a mailbox. No luck yet. Yeah, we have had a few people say that in Auckland as well. But Michael has another view. He says, don't be a slouch. I voted in Auckland and dropped it into a box at my local supermarket. Easy, he says. Very briefly, Costco, Liz in Golden Bay. Rampant consumerism. Stay at home and save the planet. Yeah, maybe a point there. And people lining up outside all night. I mean, is that a little bit far? Maybe. Who knows? Anyway, it is 20 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're heading to Southland shortly, where they're having a bad whitebait season. We'll get you there soon, but first, here's the headlines with Evie.
Kia ora, Nick. The Prime Minister believes Labour's support is holding up after challenging times. The latest One News Kantar public poll has National and Labour on 37% and 34% respectively. Experts say the death of the Queen and the long weekend may have contributed to a record low voter turnout. It's currently halfway through the voting period for the local body elections. The Chief Ombudsman has found government media teams are failing to give journalists a reason when refusing to provide information under the Official Information Act. But Peter Boschia says overall, the core public service is increasingly transparent and open. Ukraine is pointing the finger at Russia as 2 undersea pipelines spring leaks. Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak claims Russia wants to cause pre-winter panic. Danish seismologists had reported underwater blasts before the leaks were detected. The ancestral remains of Māori and Moriori are returning home after a ceremony in Austria. After almost 80 years of negotiations, Vienna's Natural History Museum has handed over 64 individuals' remains to a New Zealand delegation. An event encouraging winter workers to stay for summer employment is being held in Wanaka tonight. Queenstown businesses say they need to think outside the box if they want to attract and keep workers. And Vodafone is changing its name to One New Zealand from next year. It means the Warriors will become the One New Zealand Warriors. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Auckland on the Northern Motorway, State Highway 1, a truck breakdown has been blocking the left northbound lane after Esmond Road off-ramp. Heavy haulage is now on site trying to free up that lane. There have been delays right back through Spaghetti Junction and beyond, and I'm just hearing that there has been a fatal crash in Taupo. We'll have more on that later. Our next news bulletin and weather is at 6 o'clock.
No good. Thanks, Evie. We've just had this in Christchurch. Hospital is operating at overcapacity. It says that its emergency department and urgent care clinics will be stretched into early next week. Te Whātau Order says there were 368 presentations to ED yesterday alone, which it says is exceptionally busy for midweek. The hospital is postponing some surgeries and rescheduling some outpatient appointments. Morehouse Medical and Riccarton Clinic are currently unable to see walk-in patients. The 24-hour surgery is operating as normal today, but is busier than usual with waits of 6 hours or more. Te Whātau Order says people who need care more urgently will be seen sooner, but it's urging people who don't need emergency care to phone Healthline and they can advise people rather if they need to be seen urgently. Right, Southland whitebaiters are struggling to get even £1 in each catch. It's been one of the quietest seasons in decades, and adding to that, the season's now shorter to protect the fishery. Southland Recreational Whitebaiters Association Chair Roger McNaughton is with us now. Evening, Roger.
Good evening.
What's going on down there? Why is it so bad?
Oh, well, we've always had good years and bad years. We've had the last 3 years have been very good, and now it's a poor year, and it's always gone in cycles like this to a degree. But the whole of Southland is not catching much whitebait at all, and the reason for it we don't know. But there's still a month of the season left. That's October, so they might run before it finishes, but it's part of whitebaiting.
Talk to us about your haul so far, Ross. How's it looked like this year compared to previous?
It's substantially down. We've made about 8 trips so far to the river, various family members, and we've got had 2 pound catches and a couple of half pounds, and the rest we've just been catch and release because there's not enough, to take home. So we just either give it to a neighbour or just put it back in the river alive.
Does it have an impact on businesses, Ross? Of course, the whitebait fritters are pretty popular cuisine down your way.
Yes, well, it is legal to sell whitebait, and a lot of people, no, not a lot, but some people sell it. They probably are the grumpier ones because they're not making much money out of it. But on the majority of whitebaiters are recreational whitebaiters, and they do it to supply the family and friends. So they handle it a lot better. It's not so important. But every year on the river is an important one. So if we can come around and they come back in next season or later on this season, it'll be no different to a lot of other seasons.
Yeah, what would a fritter or some other sort of whitebait dish set you back at the moment down there?
I don't know what the last couple of years when there's been a sort of ample supply of whitebait, it's been selling for about $30. And that's $30 to $40 a pound. And possibly now with the shortage of it, those that are selling it and those that want to buy it are prepared to pay more to get it.
White gold, Ross?
Well, they've often talked about this white gold, and it's people make the decision to sell it. I prefer to give it away, as so many others do, and we're not going to hang them out because they sell it, but that's the way it is. There's not many other. I don't know if there's any other species like trout or ducks or things that we're allowed to sell. Most of them are banned from selling. So,
yeah, just quickly, your preferred method of consumption, please.
Oh, you can't beat a whitebait patty. There's various ways, and I'm no expert. I always make them the quickest way, and that's shove some eggs in with them and stir them up and make a patty. What I have seen happen, and they're quite nice, is put them in a plastic bag with a bit of flour and get a coating of flour on them and put them in a pan and fry them in butter, and they come out sort of as individuals, and they're quite nice that way, specifically on fresh white bread.
They're good however you have them, aren't they, really?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Can't beat him. Hey, thanks, Roger. Roger McNaughton there from the Southland Recreational Whitebaiters Association. I said Ross there as well. Apologies for that, Roger. Right, a Gloria Vale woman has described how her husband got in trouble with the Christian community's leadership for writing and distributing a book without their knowledge. Sarah Standtrue has told an employment court hearing she was prepared to leave the commune with him if she was asked to go. Jean Edwards reports from Christchurch.
Sarah Standtrue's husband, Vigilant Standtrue, wrote a book called Train Up a Child in the Way and gave copies to some of his friends at Gloria Vale. But when the leadership found out, the court heard the book was burnt and he was called to several shepherds and servants meetings. At one point, Mrs Standtrue says she was prepared to leave the commune with her husband.
I had gotten to the place where I was willing to go with him if he needed to go.
Sarah Standtrue became upset and had to take a break before returning to further explain why she was willing to go.
I wanted to be with him. We were not planning on leaving. It was just if we were asked to go.
She told the court her husband spent a week at a house across the river, wrote a letter of apology and was allowed back. Sarah Standtrue has been giving evidence for Gloria Vale in a case brought by 6 former members seeking a ruling they were employees during their time there. The court has previously heard evidence women and girls felt trapped. But Mrs Standtrue says Gloria Vale's overseeing shepherd has made it clear people are free to go if they want.
He has stated it very clearly that if people want to go, they are free to go, and we will support them financially.
Sarah Standtrue's 20-year-old daughter, Compassion, told the court she has a safe and happy life at Gloria Vale.
I understand allegations have been made that girls in Gloria Vale are ignorant of the outside world and they cannot make informed decisions. I disagree. I have as much contact with the outside world as I would like to have.
The court has heard evidence members have been denied food and publicly shamed, but Compassion Standtrue says that's never happened to her. She also hit out at the media, describing the times her family does something extra in the evening.
This might include playing games as a family, learning new songs, having a special film and supper, or maybe just having a lively discussion about the latest insane things the news media is putting out about Gloria Vale.
Compassion Standtrue says she wants to stay at Gloria Vale without interference from people outside who can't understand the community's way of life.
It's 5:51, kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. New medicine set to be publicly funded for a rare spinal disease and anaphylaxis reactions have been cause for celebration for advocates. This morning, Pharmac announced it will fully fund a drug for spinal muscular atrophy and EpiPens. Crystal Gibbons reports.
There have been calls to fund adrenaline auto-injectors, more commonly known as EpiPens, since 1997. It's expected up to 17,000 people would benefit from the injectors. Allergy New Zealand Chief Executive Mark Dixon is thrilled by today's announcement.
We are so excited. It's the biggest thing to happen for the allergy community in New Zealand for 25 years. When that initial submission was made in 1997, and it's the biggest news for Allergy New Zealand in over 40 years.
Mark Dixon commends Pharmac's decision and hopes the injectors will go on to be fully funded. He says EpiPens have been a massive expense, with the cheapest one around $120. They also have to be replaced yearly and may not even get used.
For people who are watching the pennies and more, worried about getting enough food at the moment or to cover the rent, health expenses like this become a luxury.
Health Minister Andrew Little has defended the 25 years it has taken for Pharmac to propose funding for EpiPens. He says it has to make independent clinical decisions on many drugs and cannot afford to pay for every treatment.
It may have taken a while. I think what it really highlights is the need to ensure that with Pharmac funding is that we are keeping ahead of what is needed.
Meanwhile, spinal muscular atrophy advocate Fiona Tolich is celebrating Pharmac's announcement to consider funding Spinraza.
The most common type is sadly also the most severe type, and in New Zealand pre-treatment those babies died on average at 13 months old from a very treatable condition.
Pharmac's Director of Operations, Lisa Williams, says Spinraza has been on their list for the last few years.
But we got a rather large budget increase in May 2022, and so we are working our way through that list now and consulting on several medicines for new funding.
Spinraza currently costs up to $400,000 a year, but the current application Pharmac is looking at is only for those under 18. Ms Tolich says New Zealand is behind the 8 ball.
This treatment has been around for a significant period of time. Other countries have since moved on. They've funded it for kids. Over 65 countries fund it for kids, and other countries are now fund it for adults as well, including Australia.
Fiona Tolich also hopes to see the disorder fast-tracked on the newborn screening panel.
Because we should never see it as acceptable to wait for children to decline before we test them.
A recent review of Pharmac's operations concluded that it needed to do better with regard to helping people with rare disorders.
Designers, performers and eager audience members are descending on the capital for the return of New Zealand's largest theatrical production. It's the first time since 2019 that the World of Wearable Arts Awards show will be staged following 2 years of COVID cancellations. Our reporter Soumya Barmadi and cameraman Angus Drever went for a look.
The biggest show in Wellington is back, and design finalists from 20 countries are here for the return of the World of Wearable Arts. One of them is Brisbane designer Bethany Caldwell. She spent a year during COVID lockdowns individually cutting and sewing 55,000 scales made from plastic document folders for her entry Documental.
I kind of had a purpose every day, which really helped those many months that I had out of work. So yeah, I think my piece was something that really helped my day-to-day kind of process of going through COVID.
This year's finalists were chosen last year before the show had to be cancelled. Bethany says it's been a long road to finally seeing her creation on stage.
Oh, I'm so excited. I think with the extra wait time, it just builds the anticipation even more. WOW is something that I've loved since I was 12 when a family friend introduced me to it. So to kind of have that love for WOW for so many years, I think now to be here finally, it feels like a full circle moment.
Shanta Poe has been performing at WOW for more than a decade, since he was 14 years old. This year, he's dancing, doing aerials, and is one of the headline singers. COVID restrictions have posed unique challenges for live performers. Shan says rehearsals for WOW began online last year.
Like some of the hardest things, dancing, would be the delay in the music. And so everyone's kind of dancing at different times. And then it would be like left and right when the choreographer's like, yeah, put your left arm out. And then you're like, your left? And then you still don't know what left is left because everyone's cameras are like, some are flipped and some are facing the right way.
Shan says it was during one of these rehearsals they heard last year's show was cancelled.
We all got a message saying that we couldn't do it, which was heartbreaking. So I think this year everyone is just super amped to get on stage and to dance in front of an audience and to have their friends and family there and supporting them. And yeah, it's going to be crazy.
About 60,000 people are expected to attend the show over the next 2 weeks, with about 35,000 of them coming from outside the Wellington region. Officials estimate it brings in about $28 million into Wellington's economy. Show director Malia Johnston has been involved with WOW for more than 20 years. She says this year's show is centred around a female deity character.
The vision is really, for me, about upholding the designs. It's a platform for people's ideas, their differences, their expressions, their diversity.
And while organisers are hinting at a big reveal on Friday, they're staying tight-lipped for now. How big a surprise?
Pretty big. Yeah, pretty big.
And how excited are you about
the surprise? Pretty excited. Yeah. That's all I can say.
Many in Wellington eagerly anticipating their chance to be wowed.
Right, time for some of your feedback now just before the news. On voting, of course, voting levels are really low, some of the lowest they've ever been. Chris Malcolm says the amalgamation of all the local body areas has created large, amorphous mega bureaucracies, disconnected and unapproachable by their communities. I imagine that means they are beyond the control of councillors. Little wonder people have given up. Cheers for that, Chris. Tiffany in Taupo says, haven't voted yet because I don't want my vote to unwittingly go to one of these VFF crackpots or conspiracy theorists, and with them hiding their allegiances, it's a real risk. Thanks very much for that, Tiffany. Right, to Vodafone. I think this is a great idea. Owen says, what about Tahi Aotearoa instead of One New Zealand? It's got a better ring to it, you'd have to say, wouldn't you? Anyway, on Vodafone as well, pity voter, another one from Paul actually, pity voter didn't use Te Reo for the new name. And don't think TVNZ 1 will be too pleased either. They are red ring, one is green. Maybe a little bit of confusion there. And finally on Costco, the warehouse don't sell coffins, but it's not like you need one that often. Good point. If you're stockpiling, I'm wondering what you're doing. Just before we go, Jim from Papamoa says, you need 48 toilet rolls when you see the Grim Reaper coming. If you don't know what that means, listen back to the show and listen to First Up this morning as well.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening. Mihi o te pō, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Voter turnout is at a record low halfway through the voting period for the local elections, and experts say the death of the Queen and the long weekend may have contributed. Just 5.3% have voted in Auckland to date, along with 10.9% in Christchurch and 4.9% of voters in Wellington. Many districts have recorded just over half the number of votes compared to the same time in previous elections. In Whangarei, outgoing Mayor Cheryl Mai says she's gobsmacked to see just 8.6% of the district vote for her replacement so far. Voting closes on Saturday, October the 8th. The Chief Ombudsman says the public should care about how government agencies respond to Official Information Act requests because the information's important for society. His office has looked at 12 government agencies and found there are significant gaps in how some respond to OIA requests. Peter Bosher told Checkpoint sometimes the government has been open in how it makes its decisions, for example, during COVID, but that hasn't always happened.
When, though, that falls by the wayside and people begin to lose trust in the freedom of information flow, that's when the rot starts to set in trust and transparency. That's why it's so important.
The Ombudsman also found some ministers are getting a heads up about information heading out 3 to 5 days before it's released, which shouldn't happen. Police have made an arrest after 2 youths and a young woman were injured in a shooting in Gisborne last night. Officers received calls from about 9:45 p.m. reporting multiple gunshots at a property in the suburb of Te Hapara. The 2 youths and woman who were outside the property at the time later arrived at Gisborne Hospital with gunshot injuries. One youth, a teenager, was seriously injured and remains in hospital. A 12-year-old was less seriously injured and has been discharged. The woman was moderately injured and remains in hospital. There was a large gathering of gang members at the property at the time. An 18-year-old man was arrested last night. The entire population of Cuba, 11 million people, has been plunged into darkness after Hurricane Ian pummeled the western end of the island. The Cuban government says the electrical system is experiencing total collapse and one of the main power plants could not be brought back online. 2 people are reported dead and buildings have been damaged nationwide. The Category 3 hurricane is packing wind speeds of up to 195 kilometres an hour and is now bearing down on Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis says the dangers are real.
You're talking about 10 feet, 12 feet of storm surge, which you could see in certain parts of this when it makes landfall. It's also going to produce a massive amount of rain. It is going to produce major flooding. Yes, it will weaken, but it will also slow, which means it's just going to be churning out rain, moving at a snail's pace. That rain is going to pile up very quickly in different parts of Southwest Florida.
About 2.5 million people across Florida are under evacuation orders, while 3,000 of the National Guard have been put on alert. Police have come across a second case of their flagging a car as stolen when it wasn't to trigger number plate reading cameras. They've largely defended their first time of doing this last October as the only means available to access all camera networks to track 3 women in a COVID-related hunt in Northland. Police say after media reports about the first case, they went looking and have found a second time they flagged a vehicle as stolen when it wasn't. It was in a county's Manukau homicide investigation in 2020. They say this is still before the courts, so they can't comment further. A Gloria Vale woman has told a court some of the allegations made in an employment court case are laughable. 20-year-old Compassion Stand True has been giving evidence for Gloria Vale in a case brought by 6 former members seeking a ruling that they were employees at the Christian community. She says she's never been denied food, forced to work when she was sick, or publicly shamed.
There are many exaggerations and distortions in the allegations against Gloria Vale. And some are even laughable, such as not getting enough time to drink water or go to the toilet, and not being allowed to have your own water bottle.
Compassion Stand True says claims Gloria Vale girls are ignorant of the outside world and can't make informed decisions are incorrect. And 1 person has died following a crash near Taupo this afternoon. The 2-vehicle crash happened on Broadlands Road near Tauhara Forest. The road remains closed and detours are in place. Motorists are advised to use State Highway 5 as an alternate route between Taupo and Reporoa. That's the news.
Tomorrow after 1pm, Grant Morris takes us through a history of New Zealand's iconic sporting venues, including a cabbage tree swamp that would later become known as Eden Park. Plus, we'll play Link 3, and we continue our series on great moments in New Zealand sports history with Rod Dixon, an Olympic medalist and one of the few New Zealanders to win the New York Marathon. That got him his name on the side of a Pan Am plane. That's all on Afternoons with me, Jesse Mulligan, from 1pm tomorrow on RNZ National.
This is RNZ National Te Reo Irirangi o Aotearoa, on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're back on Checkpoint next with Nick Truebridge. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday from Northland to Taumaru Nui, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Mostly cloudy with a few showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine with high cloud. A few spots of light rain tomorrow. From Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape and Wairarapa, cloud increasing today, rain at times tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson, rain becoming widespread this evening with some heavy falls about the ranges, clearing from Nelson tomorrow evening. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, rain heavy at times, easing tomorrow morning. Canterbury, high cloud, rain developing tomorrow afternoon with brief thunderstorms possible. Then snow lowering to 400 metres tomorrow night. Otago and Southland, fine spells and a few showers this evening. Rain developing tomorrow morning, easing to a few showers tomorrow evening. Snow lowering to 400 metres tomorrow. And for Rekohu, the Chatham Islands, mainly fine today. Cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing towards evening. The time is 7 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines are at 6:30.
Thanks, Evie. No mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint and I'm Nick Truebridge. Residents of Florida's Gulf Coast are heading for higher ground as Hurricane Ian threatens to bring a deadly storm surge. Ian has slammed into Cuba, forcing massive evacuations, cutting power to hundreds of thousands and swamping fishing villages. Meanwhile, more than 2.5 million people in Florida are under an evacuation order. The Pentagon says it has more than 3,000 National Guard troops on standby. CNN's Randy Kay reports.
This is the type of storm surge that is life-threatening.
With Hurricane Ian barreling toward Florida, many here aren't taking any chances. Guadalupe Gomez has been boarding up his home for days.
We take care of everything. Every time it's coming, we say prepare for us.
He says at least 12 of his family members will take shelter here. The concern with Hurricane Ian is not just the wind, it's also the rain and storm surge. Nearly 7 million people along Florida's west coast between Fort Myers and Clearwater, including all of the Tampa Bay area, are under a storm surge warning.
Storm surge is always one of our largest concerns here in Southwest Florida. 90% of fatalities occur due to water.
Charlotte Harbor and the cities of Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda are expecting the highest storm surge, with 8 to 12 feet possible. Around Tampa, a record surge is expected.
There's going to be a lot of water. There's no doubt about that. A storm that slows down for 24 to 48 hours and just continuously dumps rain into the Tampa Bay area is devastating.
Hurricane Ian is expected to dump at least 2 to 3 months' worth of rainfall by Friday, possibly as much as 24 inches of rain in Tampa and west central Florida.
You can't stay in your home. Whether you're a great swimmer or not, it doesn't matter. It only takes 18 inches of water to be a life-threatening situation.
Tampa's airport taking no chances.
With the storm and the intensity of the winds, we will close today at 5 p.m. That's 5 p.m. today. No more commercial flights.
Evacuation orders expanding since Monday, with shelters open for those without other options to wait out the storm.
I've never been in the hurricane. This is my first time, and my first time at a shelter. But I feel better here than if I would be alone at home.
Those riding out the storm racing to get sandbags, facing lines for gas.
We're out of water, folks, no water.
And the familiar scramble to stock up on food and water. Then, hurry up and wait.
Yep.
Like many countries around the world, Australia is grappling with the price of petrol and diesel. The price will rise by 22 cents per litre tonight, when the temporary cut to the fuel excise ends. The Albanese government says it can't justify the massive cost of keeping the discount in place. The ABC's David Sparks reports.
When petrol prices go up, some people feel it more than others. Here in Belfield in southwest Sydney, these two men make a living using their own cars to deliver takeaway food from a local restaurant. How much do you spend on fuel a week?
150, 175.
How do you feel about an extra 22 cents per litre going on the price of your fuel?
So the prices are going up, you're saying?
Yep.
Oh, okay. That's bad luck for us.
What about you? How do you feel about another 22 cents?
Very bad. Very, very bad. Yeah.
How much do you spend a week on petrol?
I think it's about 120 to 150. Yeah.
So 22 cents per litre is a lot for you.
It is. It is. Big time.
So when the federal government's petrol excise rises from 22 cents to 44 cents a litre, no one is looking forward to the extra cost.
Yes, I drive from Newcastle to Sydney quite often. It's a 2-hour drive. So, yeah, I use at least half a tank to come and half a tank to go back. So it's a full tank of petrol.
So you'll notice an extra 22 cents.
Yep, it's going to hurt.
The federal government says the 6-month reduction to the fuel excise has cost taxpayers around $3 billion, and it's time for it to end. It's a decision supported by transport expert Marion Terrell from the Grattan Institute.
Well, nobody likes to have a high petrol price or an increase in petrol prices, but cutting fuel tax wasn't a good solution to the cost of living crisis. That's partly because it was more of an advantage to those on higher incomes. That's because those on higher incomes, the highest earning 20% of households, spend almost 3 times as much on petrol as the lowest earning 20%.
Marion Terrell says there are more targeted ways to ease cost of living problems, like tax cuts or increasing welfare and family payments. As for how quickly the extra 22 cents will show up in petrol prices, the impact won't be immediate.
It should take a little while to flow through because the stocks that petrol stations will have at hand will have been paying tax at the lower rate. And so it should take a few days, a week, even a bit more than that for it to flow through. I think the other thing I'd say is that we are, in terms of petrol prices, the cost of oil on global markets has come down a lot, so it's now a barrel of crude oil is $84 US now, whereas it has been as high up in 120, I think it was. So the price on global markets has come down.
And Marion Terrell also points out we pay much less for petrol than motorists in New Zealand or some European countries like France and the United Kingdom.
The US has been dealt a blow in its efforts to improve relations with Pacific Island nations and counter China's effort to exert more influence in the region. Solomon Islands is signalling it won't sign a declaration negotiated by the US and Pacific nations as President Joe Biden prepares to host an historic presidential summit with Pacific leaders. The ABC's Marion Farr reports.
It's an agreement that covers everything from climate change to economic development.
Strengthening our partnership, fostering Pacific regionalism, tackling climate change as a big priority.
The President of the Federated States of Micronesia, David Panuelo, says the 11-point declaration between the United States and Pacific Island nations sets out key priorities for the relationship.
Enhancing our cooperation and advancing economic growth and sustainable development in the Pacific. We are committed to supporting each other to prepare and respond to natural disasters.
The White House wants to clinch the agreement at a meeting with Pacific leaders in Washington this week, but not everyone is on board. Solomon Islands has indicated it won't sign up because it wants more time to consider it. That's likely to increase anxieties in the US and Australia, where there are growing concerns about a deepening relationship between Solomon Islands and China. The ABC has approached the Solomon Islands government for comment but hasn't received a response. While several sources have stressed that negotiations over the joint declaration are still ongoing, Samoan Prime Minister Fiame Naomi Mataafa says she supports it.
It's a developing, opportunity for the region.
She says it bears some resemblance to a more sweeping trade and security deal China sought with 10 Pacific nations in May.
They're similar in the intent, of the proposing party, which, in this instance is the US and China as well.
The Chinese deal was shelved over concerns that some Pacific states had been excluded from discussions.
We've been insisting that if partners wish to talk to us collectively, then they need to do it through the modalities of the Pacific Forum.
It's criticism the White House has also faced. Cook Islands, Niue, New Caledonia and French Polynesia initially weren't invited to this week's presidential summit. Samoa's PM was among leaders who urged the US to reconsider the guest list, which it did, extending invites to all members of the Pacific Islands Forum.
When the Chinese were proposing something similar, we were giving them that message, but it didn't seem to filter through, or they weren't willing to take that on board.
Director of the Lowy Institute's Pacific Islands program, Dr. Meg Keane, says the real test goes beyond signing an agreement.
There has been promises, in fact, on a number of these type of topics in the past, and there hasn't been strong deliveries.
Palau President Sarangul Whips Jr. agrees.
I like the hope that it's just not a photo op at the White House and then that's the end of it. I hope it's substantial programs and initiatives that really build that partnership.
For now, the White House is just hoping to get a Pacific seal of approval for its new policy direction.
It's 16 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A cheating scandal continues to rock the chess world. It centres around world champion Magnus Carlsen, who has, for the first time, openly accused fellow player, 19-year-old Hans Niemann, of cheating. Mr. Niemann has strenuously denied the accusations and has accused Mr. Carlsen of trying to ruin his career, the BBC's Reginaldo Rosario reports.
When Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemann sat down to play at the Sinkfield Cup earlier this month, few would have predicted the scandal that would unfold. Niemann, the lowest-ranked player in the tournament, managed to upset the world chess champion in their third-round match, leading to an extraordinary move by Carlsen. The Norwegian withdrew from the event without explanation, only tweeting a clip of football manager Jose Mourinho speaking in response. "If I speak, I am in big trouble." Carlsen's exit was seen as an accusation of cheating against Niemann. and the American would admit that he cheated online on 2 separate occasions, although the 19-year-old denied cheating in face-to-face competition against Carlson, even offering to play naked to prove his innocence. And any chance of those allegations going away were dashed immediately when the two crossed paths again in a major online tournament last week.
And what? No.
What happened? What?
No.
Carlson quit after one move in apparent protest and said a statement would be made after the tournament ended. And he stayed true to his word on Tuesday, stating that he believed Neiman had cheated more recently than he had publicly admitted, adding that cheating is an existential threat to the game of chess.
I think the issue is really Neiman's very fast and surprising rise up the ranks. So only 20 months ago, he was roughly ranked around 800 in the world. And in that time, he's soared up the rankings and he's now in the top 50. Now, it should be said that there are some other top players in the world who have risen at a similar level, but nevertheless, it is a pretty extraordinary rise to go from relative obscurity in chess to now, right among the world's elites in such a short period of time.
Carlson's accusation comes in a year where he has also been in the headlines. In July, he announced he would not be defending the World Chess Championship he has held since 2013, citing a lack of motivation. At 31, and having been ranked as the world's best for over a decade, he would have been expected to defend his crown many times more. Still, there is some sympathy for Neiman against Carlson's claims, with no direct evidence given by the Norwegian in his statement.
Cheating is almost like a chess player's curse, as one grandmaster put it to me. Because when you're sat on the board, you're always asking, how is this adversary trying to beat me? And inevitably, there's sorts of suspicion, there's paranoia, and some of it might be justified and some of it not, but it's just the nature of the sport, really. And unfortunately, I think the authorities historically haven't done enough to sort of protect players from this.
Neiman has not responded to Carlson's latest allegations, and one suspects that there will be several more moves before the endgame is reached in this saga.
Yeah, what a story. Let's go to a little bit more of your feedback now. Angela writes, agree with the last message you read because I've not been impressed with local council. Out of touch with the community is an understatement, Angela writes. I couldn't find a candidate that I thought would be an effective person to change it. I have voted but felt empty and that it was futile, more interested in potholes than climate change. Can't get enthused. We are charged enormous fees for planting veggies, fruit, trees or natives on the road reserve here in New Plymouth. Fine to park the V8 though, Angela writes. The absence of charging infrastructure in Australia appears to be putting apartment residents off buying electric cars. The government there is preparing to announce more incentives to get people behind the wheel of more energy-friendly vehicles. Some are hoping that will be in the form of tax concessions to help bring down the prices. The ABC's Amelia Turzin reports.
Okay, so we're pulling up to the council car park right now.
Mauricio Perez is one of the 55,000 Australians who own an electric vehicle.
And it looks like, yes, there is nobody there, which means that we can quite happily charge today, which is awesome.
The Sydney resident isn't always this lucky.
You kind of have to queue up for some of the charging points, especially on Saturday mornings. So you either pick your time at the local council car park when no one's going to be there, or you sit in the queue for a bit.
And after queuing, he has to wait around for an hour or so for his car to charge. He'd like to do all of this at home instead, but there is no power plug for his Tesla in the car park of his rented apartment.
As a tenant, you don't have much of a say into getting the charging infrastructure installed, so you have to get the landlord's permission.
Mauricio Perez first asked his landlord for a car park charger last year.
Now, I didn't really want anything like a fast charger. I just wanted a simple power point. But even that involved getting access to the mains and then putting in a circuit. Going to take a lot of time and potentially even up to a couple of $1,000s to even install.
Alan Liang co-owns a company that installs EV chargers in private residences, including apartments.
The cost, in our experience, can range from sort of 2 to 4 times that of a home installation. And then the bureaucracy, obviously, of having to deal with a body corporate.
JetCharge tries to negotiate with body corporate managers on behalf of apartment residents.
They basically say, oh, but, only one person is, using and charging off of this. Why does the entire building have to pay? A range of excuses that basically mean that the decision just gets drawn out.
Federal and state governments have agreed that from next year, the National Construction Code will require the installation of EV charging capability in all new apartments. But this doesn't help the millions of people living in existing buildings. Kathy Sherry is a professor of law at Macquarie University who specialises in the issues faced by high-rise residents.
If we want them to have access to electric vehicles and to make their contribution to reducing climate change, then this most definitely is an equity issue. I suspect the most important thing that governments can do is provide templates and guides so that schemes are not flying blind. We're not just putting this responsibility on individual citizens who happen to own apartments.
In the meantime, the federal government is also helping to pay for more charging infrastructure on public streets.
That was the ABC's Amelia Turzen. The competition to host next year's Eurovision Song Contest is heating up. It's down to just 2 UK cities, Glasgow and Liverpool. They've been chosen from a shortlist of 7 locations across the country. With more, here's the BBC's David Salito.
Oh my God, it's going to be a ball. It's going to be the night of the year. I did not know it's actually my favourite night of the year. Yeah.
From an original list of dozens to a short list of 7 and now to a place in the final 2. There is, here in Liverpool, a feeling Eurovision might be on its way to Merseyside.
The shortlist now is Glasgow versus Liverpool.
Oh, wow. Didn't have a clue. Oh my God, if it came to Liverpool, trust me, we know.
I mean, every street's got nightlife on it, really. It's brilliant. But just be like, wow, can't believe Eurovision came to Liverpool. That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
However, it has a rival with an equally strong case. Glasgow and Liverpool are both UNESCO cities of music, both former European capitals of culture, and both are now vying to host next year's Eurovision Song Contest on this shortened shortlist of 2. The event should be taking place in Ukraine, which won this year's competition but has been switched to the UK because of concerns about holding the contest in a country at war. The question of which city will finally get to host will be determined largely by practical issues. The show is huge, venues need to be available for weeks before the event, and everything is running months behind schedule. A final decision will be made in the next few weeks, and then it'll be a race to have everything in place for Eurovision 2023.
The singer Shakira has been ordered to stand trial in Spain, accused of failing to pay more than $24 million worth of income taxes. If convicted, she faces up to 8 years in prison. The BBC's Jonathan Savage reports.
The period in question is 2012 to 2014, when prosecutors say Shakira underpaid tax to the tune of $14.3 million. The Colombian star describes her life in that period as nomadic because of her work, and last week vowed to fight what she calls false allegations. In July, she turned down a deal to settle the case and has insisted that she's already paid what the Spanish tax office said she owed before it filed a lawsuit. Court documents released on Tuesday confirmed the plan to force the 45-year-old to stand trial, with prosecutors seeking an 8-year prison term. The trial date has yet to be announced. Known as the Queen of Latin music, Shakira is one of the biggest-selling female Latin singers of all time.
To the US state of Colorado now, where the number of people choosing to live in their vehicles is on the rise, and like here, there are limited places to park. But one van seller is hoping to change all that. The CNN's Matt Reno has the story.
At Dave and Matt Vans in Gypsum,
the headquarters of Dave and Matt Vans,
co-founder Matt Felsner says more people are opening the door to living in vans.
The reality is that full-time living in vehicles has gone up exponentially over the last decade. particularly since COVID.
And for those already choosing that lifestyle, there could soon be a new way to live in expensive resort towns like Eagle County.
Local economy has gone up 4% in wages in the last 10 years, whereas the price of rent has gone up 40% and the price to own a home has gone up 20%.
Thanks to a new idea.
This would be the first of its kind.
That would provide a place where people could park their vans for $250 a month.
As a fee per month to be a part of the program. That would provide that safe place to live.
Which mixed with the cost of the van could save a lot of money.
Combine that into your rent, your car payment, your utilities. That is where full-time living in a vehicle really provides financial freedom.
And Matt says get more people rolling on a more affordable way to live in expensive places.
We can start to grow it here locally, as well as provide that blueprint for the rest of Colorado and other states in the country.
Yeah, they actually look quite comfortable. I might get one of those. Ursh, if you're listening, can we move into one of those and sell the house? It'd be a lot cheaper, I reckon. Anyway, a little bit of feedback before we go. Voting, of course, has been a big topic tonight. Martin writes, Nick, I think you need to make the point, this is a very good point actually, that you can post back your voting paper in the supplied free post envelope to any post box before October the 4th, Martin thinks, but look that up. Just in case. Martin voted today and he did just that. It was really easy to vote and the supplied booklet helped him make his voting decisions. So there's a little tip. You can actually just chuck it in any post box. On whitebaiting, some delicious feedback on whitebaiting. Whitebaiters need to understand that they're going to have non-seasons for a couple of years or non-seasons forever. Not hard to figure out. Yeah, look, a good point. More on whitebaiting. How do people still not understand that if you take all the baby fish, aka whitebait, they won't have a chance to grow into adult fish to make more babies? Circle of life, fam. Yeah, another good point. Neil writes, hi, the only thing to add to whitebait patty is more whitebait. It's a good point, Neil. I think... it was Roger, wasn't it? He just said egg and whitebait, but of course salt and pepper's always good. You can spice it up a little bit of chili powder or something, if you want a little bit of spice in your life, or in your whitebait, sorry. Anyway, first up's back tomorrow, and it's a good story. Did Air New Zealand underestimate how logistically complicated its route to New York will be? They'll talk to the union and the airline.
RNZ News at 6:30. Good evening, kia ora tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. A bill has passed in Parliament tonight banning livestock exports by sea. Livestock exports by air will still be allowed. Many councils have barely recorded half of the number of votes compared with the same time last year for the local body elections. A woman living at the Gloria Vale Christian community has told a court that it's laughable to claim people don't have enough time to drink water or go to the toilet. And it's been one of the poorest years for Southland whitebaiters, but it's not yet clear why their catches are so low. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
It's huge. A lot of people don't realise how big it is, but we're talking